Welcome back. As always, my name is Chris, and in this video, I'm going to be walking you through the 3 reporting tools that are available in NetSuite, including how to use them and some of their most important features. So getting into this, first off, we have the 3 reporting tools start with reports, then we have Save Searches, and then of course there's SuiteAnalytics. I'd roughly categorize them in that order. So first off, we have reports. Those are the best off-the-shelf reporting tool. They're the easiest to use. They also are quite nice visually. They're usually easy to look at and understand, and they can be used for a number of different things, anything from sales reports to oftentimes you'll be using them for financial reports like income statements, balance sheets, etc. So they're great for ease of use, but not necessarily the best in terms of customization features. So then we go to Save Searches, which are very robust from a standpoint of customization. You can do a lot of different things with Save Searches. They're quite powerful. The downsides, I would say, are that if you're not used to them, they are a little bit tricky to get the hang of, and there's a certain kind of terminology that you have to get familiar with to just be able to get the search that you want with a Save Search. And they're also not very visually interesting. They tend to just give you these lists of data. They're not necessarily the best in terms of if you want to send them as a report or a scheduled email that goes out. They just kind of look like the raw data. They're not very visually or graphically interesting. So then you go up to SuiteAnalytics, which has a lot of similar capabilities to Save Searches, a lot of things that are similar between the two. SuiteAnalytics is definitely a newer tool. It's been around just a few years, and NetSuite's constantly making updates and changes to it to make it more accessible. But the problem really with SuiteAnalytics is that people are just not familiar with it, and they tend to be more familiar with Save Searches, especially consultants. I know lots of consultants that don't know anything about SuiteAnalytics, despite the fact that it is a very powerful tool. There's a lot of things you can do with SuiteAnalytics, including things that you just can't do with Save Searches, like pivot tables or a lot of the graphical charts, line plots, things like that you have available to you with SuiteAnalytics, you simply cannot do with a Save Search. Especially, you might see these charts that you'll have on your dashboard that look all fancy. Those are using SuiteAnalytics, and you can make those actually quite easily. So in the course of this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use all 3 of these tools and really focusing on some of the highlighted features. So let's get into this. All right, so here we are in our home dashboard. I'm in the administrator role, and the first thing we're going to do is just check out these 2 tabs here. So these 2 tabs, reports and analytics, this has all 3 of these reporting tools. So analytics is obviously its own thing, and then when we go to reports, this drop down has a lot of different things, but starting with reports, I'm going to scroll down, and from here, this financial tab, from financial down, those are all these pre-made reports that you're going to be using. So for example, financial has a lot of useful ones that are pretty common. Then you can also go down to sales. You can do things like sales by sales rep. Those are great. You can go to purchases, all kinds of pre-made reports. You simply have to go through and just find one that's applicable for your needs. So just to give an example, let's pull up an income statement. I'm just going to click on that. And we come to this income statement here. So if you know anything about accounting, this should be pretty familiar to you. I'm not going to go into every feature, especially for the sake of this video, but you do have certain features like these accordions. You can make it smaller or larger, and you can do things like by clicking on any one field or line in the report, you can pull up. You're basically drilling down into that thing. So let's say in this case, I was clicking on purchases. We have all the different journal entries that make up that summarized figure that we saw when I was clicking over here. So this 5 million. When we click in here, we can see all the journal entries that make up that number. So that's the basics of it. You can obviously scroll down and see everything that composes this. Another important aspect of this is down here. This whole bar has basically all these different features that allow you to really kind of sift through or kind of slice and dice these reports however you need. So there's a few different ones that relate to the time period, especially if you've ever pulled up a report and it simply says it has no information available. The first thing I would do is check these dates, because you might be selecting a date time period that simply doesn't have any information available. So you can always check down here. It's pretty easy to change them. You can simply click around here. You can also go to this, which give you some quick filters for grabbing either by month or by quarter or by year, etc. And you can just mess around with them. They're pretty intuitive. Then you have the subsidiary. So if you want to limit it not by the parent, but by a specific subsidiary, you can simply click that. And then you have column. So column is great because you can simply select whatever that range is. Let's say we want to do this income statement by quarter. So I can click accounting quarter. And if I hit refresh, it now takes that income statement and it breaks it down, not just by the year, which is what we were looking at, but we can see every single quarter for that year. We also have this more feature down here. If I click on that, we get a bunch of other ways that we can break this down. So we can break it down by various customers. We can do by location, class, department, any of the usual classifications, as well as item. So a lot of different features here that allow you to really sift this information, whatever the report is, down to the exact things that you want. So those are some key features. We do have this customize feature down here, which if I click on, brings us to the report builder. I'm not going to go into detail in this video on how to use this report builder. It's not a very helpful tool. It can be used for specific things as needed, but just to give a little bit of an orientation, it's at the top here, we have these categories of things that you can alter or customize for your report. So the layout of the report, the various columns that go in it, as well as the filters. For example, when we were looking at filters like classes or departments, as you click on it, you'll see those various classifications and those filters, they'll be shown here. You have other options in terms of how you want to sort the information, as well as some kind of a grab bag of additional features that you can see here. So those are the basic features of the report builder. I do have another video that covers it in detail and how to go through that. So in this case, I'm not going to go any further on that. Now, one thing, if you do want to go back, don't hit the back arrow button. You want to simply hit this save button, which will save any changes you make and take you back to your original report, which we have here. So a couple other features I want to highlight. Down here, we have a bunch of export options. So if you want to export this as a CSV file, maybe you want to send it even as a Word doc, it'll make kind of a nice Word doc showing the entire income statement. You can send that off or simply have it for your own records. And then these features are very helpful. Specifically, we have email. If I click on that, we can send this report to someone as an email attachment or even in the body of the email. I have another video that covers exactly how to use this tool, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but you're simply going to select who you're sending it to. You're going to say, what is the message that goes with that email? And do you want the income statement to be in the body of it, or do you want it as an attachment, etc.? You can set all of that here. And then if you have any other attachments you want to include, let's say you're doing a sales by sales rep, and you want to also include an attachment that always shows all the list of your sales representatives, you could attach that here and it would go with every email, either this one or any scheduled emails. Which brings me to my next point. If you don't want to just send a one-off email, but you want to have emails go out as a routine, let's say the sales for the week or all the leads that were generated from yesterday, you can create these scheduled emails that go out. So the concept is very similar to what I just showed you with the emails. The difference is that you're going to be setting what the schedule is here. And it's pretty straightforward. If you just look at the things that prompt you, if you have any questions, you can always click on these and look at the field help, which describe exactly how you set up the schedule. But pretty straightforward in general. You can set all the list of recipients, and that can be a great tool for sending out these scheduled reports based on your executive's needs, etc. So those are some of the key things to show regarding reports. All right, now if you've been finding this video helpful so far, hit that like button and let me know in the comments section, what would you like to see a video on regarding NetSuite? A lot of the videos I've made so far have just been based on people telling me they have a hard time with something or there's a certain aspect or tool that they haven't been able to figure out. So definitely let me know. It's not very difficult for me to make these videos, but I need to know what to make the videos on. So even if you just want to provide me feedback, please leave me a comment in the comments section down below. And keep in mind, I come out with a new video every week. So if you want access to those, do hit the subscribe button. So let's get back into this. I'm going to go back to the home page just to start off at square zero now that we're getting into saved searches. So to access saved searches, we're going to go back to the reports tab. And this time we're going to go down to new search. Now, if you want to pull up saved searches that have already been created, you can go here and it has a whole list of available ones. But in this case, we're just going to create a new search. So of the search, the first thing it's going to ask you is what kind of search are you doing? Are you trying to look up all the different customers that you have, or maybe you're trying to pull up employees and look at the differences between pay? Whatever it is, you're going to select that type of thing that you're looking at. In this case, we're going to be looking at transactions. So transaction-based saved searches are by far the most common because that includes everything from invoices, procurement orders, bills, cash payments, any of those things. Those are all considered transactions, and those will all be using a transaction-based search. So we're going to click on that. And it pulls us to this aspect. And really what we're looking at here is we've got criteria on the left and results on the right. Those are the two pillars of any search or saved search. So basically what that's specifying, just to give a hypothetical example, if you're looking for a type of person, you might specify as your criteria, well, I want a Caucasian male, I want him to be over 40 years old and under 6 feet in height. So out of all the available people, it would look with those criteria and it would find, okay, these are all the people that fit that criteria. Then you can specify what are the results. So let's say out of 50 people that are now selected in that criteria, you want to know what's their date of birth, how much do they make every year, how many cars do they own, or whatever that information is. That would be the results side of thing. So you have those criteria and those results. Now, criteria, in my opinion, when you're first dealing with saved searches, that's the hardest thing to kind of get used to and get familiar with, because you might know what you want to search, but manifesting that in the criteria can sometimes be difficult because there's just certain terms that saved searches use and NetSuite uses for their saved searches that you just really have to get familiar with. So you've got this drop down where you can select amongst a huge amount of available criteria. And the most common ones that you're ever going to see is going to be mainline, which is selecting, do you want it to be like a sales order as a whole thing, or do you want to get into every single item that is composed within that sales order? And mainline is going to be that fork in the road of one or the other. That's a very, very common criteria. Then you can have things like type, do you want a bill or do you want an invoice, etc. You can have things like status, amount, date. You can also have any of the different classifications, whether that's location, classes, departments, any of those are pretty common in terms of criteria. So let's take an example here of a very simple saved search. Let's say we want to look for invoices and we want the whole invoice, not every line item as part of it. And we want any invoice that's over $1,500 and maybe in some specific locations. So let's set those criteria here. First thing we're going to do is set mainline. And like I said, we're not getting into the line level. So we're going to select mainline as yes. And we'll hit set. Next, we want to do type because we have to specify that it's going to be an invoice. So out of this whole list, we're going to go down to invoice. And we could select multiple if we want, but in this case, invoice is fine. And I said we're going to do an amount over $1,500. So I'll do amount greater than or equal to $1,500. And I'll hit set on that. And then lastly, we're going to limit it by certain locations. So if I go, let's say maybe Boston and Atlanta, those are the two locations we want to limit this search to. So we've got our criteria here, and now we can go over to our results. Now notice here in results, right, we're in this subtab, we've got all these results that are currently available to us. And the reason it already comes with ones is because we've already determined that this is a transaction search. So NetSuite just kind of assumes there's certain results that we would want. In most cases, some of these are probably pretty helpful. If you don't want them at all, you can hit remove all and take them out. But a lot of these we're fine with. I am going to remove some of these superfluous ones at the bottom here. And also, if we go to type, now this is just going to be limited to invoices. So I don't actually need type there because I know they're all going to be invoices. So I'm going to remove that one. But I do want to add, if I go to add here, I want to add location, because there's two possible locations. So I do want to see if it's either Boston or Atlanta based on the invoice. So now that I have my results selected here, we're going to do a submit on this search. Okay, so we've pulled up this search and we can see things like the internal ID. We've got a various selection of dates here. We've got the name of the customer related to this invoice, as well as things that the accounts receivable that's impacted, and the amounts. You can see these amounts are all over $1,500. They're all with Boston. And I think if we go to the bottom here, we've got a handful that is from the Atlanta area. So we've got a successful search. Now this is not a save search at this point. We've just done a search. So let's actually go up here and let's hit save this search, which is going to give us the opportunity to actually make it something that we can access in the future or have others access. So we have now a saved transaction search, and let's call this a test search 1. So I can refer back to that. And notice we have our criteria and our results are still here, but now we have all these different other options. So In some other videos, I really dive into what all these features are, but I'm just gonna blow through them pretty quick in this video. So we have things like sorting. So when you pull up your list of saved searches, do you want it alphabetical with A at the top or Z at the top? You can sort it. You can also have the output. In this case, the output is normal, but you can have it come out as grid, or there's a couple others. There's like graphical features, so you can have that output come through. When we come to the results here, we have a few different functions and options here. We have summary type. So one thing you can do is both on the criteria and on the results side, you can group things. So let's say all different types of sales orders can all be grouped by customer, and you can have those kind of aggregated together. The only thing you got to watch out for that is once you start a summary search, it is a summary search. It's going to start grouping everything, and the first thing you're going to see is all the summary level information. So you just got to keep in mind, I have a video specifically on how to do that. It can be a little bit tricky to get the hang of, but that's something to keep in mind. It is available to you. We also have things like formula, which is if you want to put in specific formulas relating to that, in this case, results. You can also do it for criteria that fit very specific needs. Maybe you want to sift through a bunch of information and only select certain things. You can add those formulas as needed. It's a little more complex, but it still is doable if you can understand the basics of it. And I do have a video that covers really how to get into that. We've got some other things available, such as custom labels. So if you want the top to not say name, but you want it to say customer, you can make custom labels for everything, as well as labels if you're dealing with a summary search. So now coming up to the top, we've got other subtabs here. So what do these things do? Well, first off, we have highlighting. So if you want to have highlighting of any sort related to your saved search, maybe orders that are not just over $1,500, but over $10,000, you want to highlight those. You could add that using this. It's a pretty simple tool. You could also have things like certain customers can show up as red or bold, whatever you want. You can do that with a highlighting subtab. Then we have audience and role. So audience is basically going to give you the opportunity to make your saved search available to be used by others. So if you do this select all button here, you can make anyone else, whether regardless of role, department, no matter what, anywhere in your company, you will give them access to be able to use this saved search. Then when you're dealing with role, you can set for certain roles if this saved search is going to be considered the preferred search. So if you're going to a certain type of list, do you want this one to be the preferred search for that list? And you can set that by role. Then we go over to email. So this is definitely a helpful feature. There's basically two types of emails you can associate with a saved search. You can either have it as an alert or as a scheduled email. And the reason you'd want to use an alert is, let's say you're dealing with certain types of sales, and if you want a sales order maybe that's over a vast amount of money, you want that to kind of trigger so that you know that that sales order has come in. You can set that as an alert. So every time that one thing happens, an alert comes to you. Or maybe even have an account that should not have any GL impacts hitting it, so you can set it up where if any do, you will be alerted. So it's kind of an alarm that goes off for that. Then the other category would be a summary. So just like when we did the reports, you could have certain saved searches just go out as a routine, maybe once a week, showing all the different sales that occurred for the past week, and that would go out to the various recipients that you set. The way to set that difference is this is for alerts. And then if you click here and it selects all of these are for setting up schedules. And then you'll go through the various sublists here, which basically set up, when is that thing going out? What's the information? What's the text that go with it? What's the attachment, etc. You can set all that here. So that is the basics of saved searches. A lot of other features here, but it's pretty straightforward. You can go through that at your own leisure. But now that we have things as we want, I am going to hit save and run so we can save this saved search as we have it. Okay, so here we have our saved search. And now what I'm going to do, because this thing's called test search 1. So I'm going to go to my home dashboard and I'm going to add a new portlet. So let's go to custom search. And I'm going to go to setup. And the search, I'm going to grab from the list of all the available searches, I'm going to grab the one that I had. Test search 1. So I'm going to hit save. And now we've pulled up, based on that saved search that I made, I can add it as a portlet right here on my dashboard. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to add these things to your dashboard. So those are the basics of saved searches. Now let's take a look at SuiteAnalytics. I'm going to go up here to the dash. on Suite Analytics. Now, the first thing we're looking here is all the available workbooks currently in Suite Analytics. And a lot of these are simply templates, and except for this one, I used this for a previous video that I made, but you can go through these. In general, you're going to be using Suite Analytics for a specific reason. So the odds that one of these templated Suite Analytic workbooks is going to fit your needs is probably not very high, but you can always take a look at them. So the main thing to understand about Suite Analytics is that you're dealing with two things. You're dealing with datasets and workbooks. And datasets is really like the raw material or the raw information that you're going to specify. And then based on that, so you're going to have these available materials or information. And then using that data set, you're then going to create workbooks. And workbooks can either be tables, or they can be pivot tables, or graphical charts. And they're going to draw from the data sets that you've already made. So first thing we need to do is create a data set. So if you click up here, we've got all these available data sets that just come with NetSuite. But in this case, we want to create our own data set. So we're going to go over here to new data set. If I click on that, just like when we do a save search, we're going to specify the type of data set we're doing. So just like save searches, we always specify, or it's common to do a transaction type search, we're going to do a transaction data set. So if I go up here and click transaction, down here I've got transaction. So I'm going to click on that. And you'll notice as we go through this that there's a lot of similarities between Suite Analytics and Save Searches. So try to kind of think with those similarities, and it'll kind of sift through and clarify things for you as you go through. So we're brought here to create the data set, and this is honestly where I think most people run into problems with Suite Analytics and really just kind of drop it all together. Because at this point, you've really done nothing except specify that you want a data set that's for transactions, and yet you have all of these different things on your dashboard going on. So let's just break it down piece by piece. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually minimize this to kind of just clean it up a little bit. And let's really just specify what are we looking at, and also comparing it to a safe search. So when you're making a safe search and you've specified it's a transaction search, remember we had criteria and results. Well, it's the same thing here. We've got criteria, and if you remember, there was no criteria specified when we created that safe search. Just like that, if we come here, this is where our criteria goes. And as you can see, there's nothing there. So if we want to add something, we have to drop fields in there. Then we have our results, which are these blue selected things right here, this little kind of column of things. And just like when we did a safe search, NetSuite assumed what we wanted for our results. So it kind of gave us some results to begin with. So that's what we're looking at here. And then these are the results just as they are. But then over here, just like when we hit preview or we hit run on the safe search and we get that generated list, that search result, this is exactly what we're looking at here. These are the results that we have here specified down here. And because there's no criteria set, it's grabbing every single transaction that's available. So if you look down here, the total rows, 3,800. So any kind of transaction within these results is being listed out here. So we've got all of this. So let's now, just like the example we had before with those invoices over $1,500, let's create the same exact thing, but for Suite Analytics. So the way we would go about doing that to add new features, in this case criteria, is we're gonna come up here. And let's say in that one, when we did the save search, the first thing we did was a main line. So let's do the same thing. We're gonna do mainline, and it's gonna give us this listing here. And on the left, you're kind of looking at the category of thing, and on the right, it's the literal name of the line. So there's a transaction line called mainline, and that's what we want. So we're gonna grab that, and we're gonna drag it over into our criteria. And when we release it, it's gonna say, do we want it to be mainline true or false? And we want it to be true, just like in our save search. So we wanna hit apply on that. Good, so we now have that selected, and the next thing we had was type. So type, we've got a lot more options here, but it's really something you just got to get used to kind of looking at and looking for what you want. So in this case, we have the type is transaction, and we don't want abbreviated type or correction type or any of these other weird things. We just want type. So we're going to select that. We're going to drag it into our criteria. And it's going to say, well, what kind of type? Well, we want an invoice. So we're going to go down to invoice. We're going to double click that, and it adds it here. We could add other things just like the save search. We'll hit apply on that. So now we've got mainline is true and type is invoice. So one of the other things we had was the amount. And we've got here transaction total amount. So we're going to grab that and we're going to add it in here. And so we've got greater, but we wanted greater than or equal to, just like with our save search. And we said it was $1,500, and we'll hit apply. Now, one thing we can do, just to point it out, is notice over here in the results, right? Because these results are being reflected here. Notice we already have total amount. We actually also have type. We could have just grabbed from here. We didn't have to do a search. I could have simply grabbed from our results and I could have dragged it up into our criteria. So keep in mind these things can interact in that way, which is pretty handy. And the last thing we had was location. So location I do not have here, so I'm going to do a search on location. And again, I'm going to get a bunch of different options, but I'm just going to sensibly look at them and go, okay, well, what's clearly the thing that I want? I don't want property location or allocation strategy. I want location, and I want the one that's related to transaction lines. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to bring it up into my main line, and I'm going to select, just like before, I'm going to select Atlanta and Boston, and I'll hit apply on that. Good. So now I have all the exact criteria that I had for my save search. And as you can see, it's pretty simple to do. The last thing is looking at our results. So we've got a few different results that are helpful over here. We've got the amount, we've got the name, the document number, but one thing that we are missing is the location. So I'm going to grab location from here again. And I could also grab it, just so you are familiar, I can grab it from here as well, and I can drag it down. So just like you can drag results up into criteria, you can drag from criteria down to results. So if I drop it here, it's not removing it from my criteria, it's simply adding it down here. And if I scroll down, way at the bottom, remember I had a few Atlanta invoices, so I've got those down here. So really we're looking at the exact same thing. And instead of having to go from the criteria and the results over to previewing or running the search, I have all that information available to me right here. So this is, as you can see, it's pretty interactive, it's pretty visually user-friendly, and you just kind of get familiar with where are things. And once you're used to that, it's operating just like a save search. So we've got the things that we want. So at this point, I'm going to hit save on this, and I'm going to call it my invoice dataset test 1. Now you can put a description as needed. In most cases, it's recommended to include a description of what that data set is for. And we're going to hit save on that. Great. So it even notifies us that the data set's been saved. So now if we click back on analytics, now that we've created that data set, now I want to create a workbook that utilizes that data set. So I'm going to go to workbooks. And again, instead of using these templates, I'm just going to create a new workbook. So in this case, I need to show what data set am I drawing from. So I had my invoice data set test 1. So I'm going to click on that. And it brings us to this page, which is basically where NetSuite's saying, okay, you want to create one or more workbooks. It needs to be one of these three types of workbooks. And those are tables, pivot tables, and charts. Now, tables are a lot like a data set themselves. It's just a simple spreadsheet. You have usually like invoice numbers going down on the left side, and then the top will be all your columns of information like name of customer, amount, etc. So table is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to show you that for the purposes of this, but pivot tables are where things get interesting and where you get a lot of functionality out of SuiteAnalytics that you cannot get from a save search, because you can't do a pivot table or the concept of multiple joins using save searches. It's something you can only do with SuiteAnalytics or using Suite scripts. So now that we have our workbook here, basically what you're looking at is far on the left here, we have the data set that we grabbed. So if you remember, all of those options, those results criteria that we had in our data set are now available to us on the left. If we wanted to add anything additional, like if we found, oh, well, we should also have status because we want to see what's pending fulfillment or pending approval, we could do that by simply hovering over these three dots, going to open data set. It would bring us back to the data set. We could add that feature or that result, and it would then bring us back over here and we could be able to use that parameter. So we're fine with things as they are. So now we get over into this area, and this is basically the layout is here, and this is kind of represented in words, and then we're seeing it graphically on the right, kind of the results of that thing. So rows are these over here on the left, and that's basically, again, in most cases, that's going to be like all your invoices or maybe your customers listed in the rows, and then your columns, you can provide whatever you want. And then the measures in the middle, which is represented here, is generally going to be some kind of amount or some numerical amount. In this case, we're going to do total amount, simply showing the amounts of those invoices. So let's put some fields in here. Let's say for the rows, we want to have customer. So I'm going to grab, in this case, the customer is referred to as entity. So we're going to drop that customer name in there. And then we're going to go to, for columns, let's say we want to have date. So I'm going to take date and I'm going to drag it into columns. And then measures, we want to know the amount of the invoices. So I'm going to take total amount and I'm going to drop it into measures. So unlike in the previous data set, and if you do a table, for example, it will update as you interact with them. But in this case, it's a little too complex for it. So we're going to need to hit refresh up here. And it will give us this simple pivot table, which shows us all the customers on the left in these rows. And then in the columns, we can see 2022 and 2023. Obviously, if we had more years, it would be a bigger pivot table here. Now at this point, we really just have a table. So now let's add the pivot element. Let's add document number in under entity. And instead of just date, let's also add a location. So we're going to add location in there. And now let's do a refresh on this. So now you can see we've got the customer here, and then within the customer, we've got all the different invoices that relate to that customer. And then on the column side, we have not just by year, so let's say we have 2023 here, but we also have it broken down by location by year. So that's really where you get into things getting segmented even further as you're dealing with these pivot tables, and where you can really get pretty elaborate in terms of breaking down information for your needs. So a lot of different features that you have available here. A couple other ones I just want to highlight quickly. If you go down to measures and you click on these little dots here, you have formatting and conditional formatting, and you really just have to go through that. I have a video that really dives into the various options, but you can do things like highlighting, having little arrows that point at things. So a lot of different options there. Also like how you want it to be shown, like maybe you want the currency symbol at the end or the numbers to be big or small or however you want. You've also got some various export and summarizing features here at the top. So just keep in mind that that's available to you. And then of course we can go up here and we can hit save. So I'm going to do this as my invoice pivot table. I'm going to hit save on that. So the last thing I'm going to show you with SuiteAnalytics is how to make a chart. So now that I've saved that workbook, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hit this plus symbol, which is going to allow me to make a new tab, a new workbook chart. So in this case, I'm going to click chart over here. And same thing, I'm going to simply, I've got my data set over here. Then we have our x-axis here. We have our series. You'll see how that works in a second, but you can put series of things. And then what does that measure? What's it going to be measured by? So to just give an example, we can do, let's say the customers on the x-axis. And let's say we want to do total amount on the measure. And let's just leave it like that for now. And let's do refresh to see how that looks. And we're dealing with a column chart right now. So what's going to give us is this column chart. It's got all the different customers at the bottom, and it's measured on the y-axis of amount. And if we want to add a series, let's say we want to add date, in this case it's date by year, we can simply drop it in there and we can hit refresh. And that's basically going to split things off. So if you take a look at this, most of these are this purple, which is actually transactions from 2023, which is when most of our transactions were. But then you can also see the orange ones. In this case, there's really one that stands out, which is this 2022, both relating to this one customer, which is Camito Foundation. So obviously, if you had a bunch more years and more transactional information, you would see a series of charts, and you could even break it down. If it wasn't just 2 years, but maybe 3 years, it would be several different columns that all show for that customer, how did it break down year by year, all in one graphical representation. And you could export this, you could set it up on a dashboard, you can even put it up on a big screen that you have in your office to be able to see just updating how our sales doing, things like that. So these things are very handy, very easy to use. You can set it, instead of having it as a column chart, you can click over here and select it as maybe a line chart. So if we hit refresh on that, it gives us a line chart as needed. And you can go all into the exact properties of it and how, what are the axes, how far does it go, how limited, what colors are using. All of that stuff is totally customizable. And just like I showed you for saved searches, once you've created one of these charts, you can simply add it to your dashboard to have that on display. So that's it for the 3 reporting tools in NetSuite. I hope over the course of this video, you've gotten some understanding on how to use them, as well as what are some of the inherent strengths and weaknesses for each. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you want to check out future videos, make sure to subscribe. And of course, please leave me a comment below to let me know what are some future videos you'd like to see me make, or just to give me any kind of feedback. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.